It all started on an evening that seemed like any other. People were finishing their work, walking home, or sitting quietly in their homes, unaware that this night would change everything they knew about their world. The sky, which had been calm and ordinary, suddenly lit up with strange, glowing lights. At first, people thought it was some kind of meteor shower or a rare atmospheric phenomenon, something beautiful to watch and nothing more. But soon, it became clear that these lights were different. They moved in ways that no airplane or natural object ever could. They shifted smoothly, changing direction abruptly, disappearing and reappearing in the blink of an eye. The lights were too precise, too deliberate to be natural, and slowly, a sense of unease began to spread. As the lights grew brighter, they descended toward the major cities of Earth. People gathered outside, staring up with a mix of awe and fear. Children clung to their parents, not knowing whether to cry or marvel at the sight. News channels began broadcasting live, capturing the images for everyone to see. The glowing crafts were enormous, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. They hovered silently, as if the air itself had no effect on them. The hum they made was not loud, but it resonated in the chest, deep and almost alive, a vibration that made people feel uneasy in their bones. What shocked humanity the most was what came next. The crafts began projecting messages, not sounds, but images and symbols that everyone could understand in a strange, almost magical way. Then words appeared, floating in the air in every language. We come in peace. We beg for mercy. Our world is lost. We are desperate. Please, help us. The message was urgent, heartfelt, and terrifying all at once. Humans had always imagined what aliens might be like, but they had never expected them to be so vulnerable. These were not conquerors or invaders. These were beings who were pleading, beings whose survival depended entirely on the response of humans. People everywhere stopped what they were doing to watch. On the streets of New York, London, Tokyo, and Rio, people looked up with disbelief. The initial awe soon mixed with fear. What did this mean? Could humans trust them? Could Earth survive an encounter with a species so unknown, so advanced, and yet so desperate? Governments were thrown into chaos. Military leaders debated immediate defense measures while diplomats hurried to find a way to respond. Scientists tried to understand the ship's technology, their size, and their origin, but nothing in human history or science books could explain what they were seeing. Every expert, from physicists to astronomers, admitted that humanity was witnessing something unprecedented. The aliens themselves were visible now, their forms revealed through the translucent walls of the hovering crafts. They were unlike anything humans had seen, yet there was something familiar about them, as if their eyes, or whatever served as their eyes, reflected emotions humans could recognize: fear, exhaustion, and despair. Their movements were graceful but careful, like creatures who had survived unimaginable hardship. Despite their advanced technology, there was a fragility to them. They did not appear aggressive. They did not carry weapons that humans could see. Everything about them seemed designed to communicate vulnerability rather than threat. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying. People began sharing videos on social media. Soon, the world was united in attention, and no one could look away. News outlets described them as beings of light, ghostly visitors, desperate travelers, and creatures pleading for life. Children asked questions no one could answer, and adults felt a strange mix of hope and fear. Everyone could sense that this was no ordinary encounter. Humanity had thought of itself as the dominant species on the planet, the rulers of Earth. Yet now, there was a reminder that the universe was far larger, far stranger, and far more unpredictable than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, in homes and offices, conversations turned philosophical. People debated whether it was safe to respond. Was this a trap? Could these beings be lying to gain some advantage? Could Earth be invaded under the guise of pleading for mercy? Scientists and thinkers warned that humanity was facing a dilemma unlike any before, a decision that might determine the future of their entire species. Every individual, whether they realized it or not, felt the weight of the moment. Some were moved by sympathy, imagining a world destroyed and lives lost, hoping to extend kindness. Others felt instinctive fear, imagining weapons, control, and dominance. The tension was everywhere, visible in the streets, in newsrooms, and even in quiet homes where people just stared at the sky at the same time. The world noticed that these aliens did not just appear in one place. Their crafts hovered above every major city simultaneously, and in smaller towns they were visible too, though fewer in number. It was not just an event for the powerful nations. It was universal. For the first time, the entire world was united in attention, watching the same phenomenon, feeling the same tension, the same fear, the same hope. It was an event that reminded humans how small they were in the grand scale of the universe. Scientists scrambled to understand how the aliens had traveled such unimaginable distances. Their technology appeared advanced beyond human comprehension. Yet, they did not use violence. They did not demand surrender. They simply asked for mercy. That was what made this encounter different. Humans had read stories of invasion and conquest, of wars fought in the sky and in space. But here were beings who admitted defeat before even stepping on the planet. creatures who acknowledged their own weakness and begged for the mercy of another species. As the night went on, fear gave way to curiosity, and curiosity mingled with caution. Some people, unable to sleep, stayed outside watching the ships hover silently. Others looked at their neighbors differently, realizing that this night would be remembered for generations. Governments quietly initiated emergency meetings. Leaders struggled with a question that had never been asked before. How do you deal with a species so different, so advanced, and so vulnerable? Every military commander knew that any wrong move could trigger disaster. Every diplomat understood that the wrong response might ignite a war they were not prepared for. And yet, a small voice in the minds of many humans whispered something strange, an instinctive recognition of shared vulnerability. A feeling that perhaps the aliens were not enemies, but beings in need of help, just like humans themselves might one day be. Amid all this, ordinary life was changing. Streets emptied as people watched the sky. Businesses closed early, schools canceled classes, and cities fell into a strange, quiet anticipation. It was a mix of tension, hope, and awe. Families huddled together, some praying, some arguing, some simply staring. Social media was flooded with videos, messages, and speculation. Scientists debated the aliens' biology, their intentions, and the meaning behind their words. Historians compared this event to the first encounters between humans and previously unknown tribes or civilizations. Yet even those comparisons felt inadequate. Humanity had truly never seen anything like this. And then the first signs of emotion from the aliens became visible. Their movements were careful, deliberate, almost pleading. They seemed to be watching humans, observing reactions, trying to understand the beings they had approached. People reported a feeling, almost a connection, as if the aliens could communicate not just through words but through presence, through an energy that resonated with humans on a deep, almost subconscious level. For the first time, humans realized that this was not just an arrival, it was a test, a moment that would define how Earth would respond to forces far beyond its understanding. By the end of the night, the world had changed. No one could ignore the presence of these beings. Every human being had felt it, seen it, or at least heard of it. Fear mixed with curiosity, tension mixed with awe, and the question hung over the planet. What would humans do when faced with a species that had survived everything, yet now depended entirely on their mercy? The sky remained lit, the ships hovering silently, as if waiting for an answer, as if the fate of their species and perhaps of humanity depended on the decisions that would soon follow. The night ended, but the story was only beginning. The morning after the alien arrival, the world was still in shock. The night sky had returned to its normal color, but the memory of the glowing ships hovering above the cities remained vivid in every human mind. Scientists, government officials, and ordinary people alike were struggling to process what had happened. Nobody could sleep well, and conversations everywhere started with the same question: what do we do now? While some people were fascinated, others were terrified, imagining worst-case scenarios. The world had faced nothing like this before, and everyone understood that whatever came next could change life on Earth forever. Governments quickly formed special task forces. Teams of scientists, linguists, diplomats, and military advisors were put together to establish first contact. Their mission was simple but terrifying: to communicate with the aliens and understand their intentions. The urgency of the situation was overwhelming. The aliens had asked for mercy, but mercy is not something humans could give blindly. Some argued that the aliens might be lying, trying to trick humans to gain control. Others felt that ignoring their plea would be cruel, and could even provoke the destruction of an entire species. Every decision mattered, and the weight of that responsibility rested on a few human shoulders. The aliens' technology fascinated everyone. Their ships seemed to defy gravity, moving without engines or wings. Their communication system was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Words appeared in every language, as if they somehow knew how to speak to each person individually. This suggested intelligence far beyond human understanding. Yet their message was simple. They were desperate, their world destroyed, and they needed protection. Scientists studied the craft endlessly, trying to decipher its energy source, its movement patterns, and even whether the aliens themselves were organic or something else entirely. Every discovery made humans both amazed and anxious. A group of diplomats and scientists was chosen to meet the aliens face to face. They traveled to a secure landing area, the only place large and safe enough for the alien ships to land. As they approached, the aliens emerged. They were taller than most humans, with long, slender limbs and eyes that seemed to reflect both intelligence and sorrow. Their skin shimmered in soft colors that changed with their emotions, almost like light flowing across water. There was something about their presence that commanded attention, a mixture of beauty, vulnerability, and quiet power. It was easy to see why people described them as ethereal or ghostly. The aliens spoke, or rather communicated, in ways that were almost instinctual. Their voices, or the sound they produced, carried emotion more than words. They explained that their home planet had been destroyed by a catastrophic event. Perhaps it was a cosmic storm, perhaps a war among their species, but whatever it was, their civilization had been wiped out. Millions had died, and the few survivors had been traveling through space for decades, searching for refuge. Their journey had been perilous, filled with dangers that humans could barely imagine. Exposure to deadly cosmic radiation, near collisions with black holes, and scarcity of resources. Listening to them, the humans felt a deep mix of sympathy and fear. These were not conquerors, they were victims, and they had nowhere else to turn. But the alien story also revealed something troubling. Though they begged for help, they were far from defenseless. They had technology that could easily dominate the Earth if they chose. Their plea for mercy was genuine, but it carried an unspoken warning. Harming them could lead to consequences humans could not predict. The diplomats and scientists understood that they were negotiating with beings who were both extremely vulnerable and immensely powerful. It was a paradox that made their job almost impossible. How do you decide what to do when the other party is simultaneously helpless and capable of unimaginable destruction? As discussions continued, humanity realized another truth. Earth was not entirely alone in its power. Beneath the surface of the planet, in forests, oceans, and remote regions, existed creatures that humans had long thought to be myths. Legends of giant beasts, dragons, and other mysterious beings were often dismissed as folklore, but now, evidence suggested otherwise. These creatures were intelligent, powerful, and aware of the alien arrival. Unlike humans, they did not rely on diplomacy, technology, or politics. They responded instinctively, guided by a sense of balance and justice. While humans debated, these monsters watched, waiting, assessing the newcomers. Their presence was invisible to most people, but their influence was growing. The arrival of the aliens seemed to trigger something in these hidden beings. Deep within the forests, massive trees trembled as enormous creatures moved silently among the shadows. In the oceans, creatures larger than submarines swam near the surface, sensing the disruption in the planet's balance. In the mountains, winged predators soared high above, keeping a watchful eye. These monsters were not mindless beasts. They had their own intelligence and their own rules. They had observed humans for centuries, judging behavior, understanding patterns, and now the aliens were being added to their assessment. Were these newcomers a threat to Earth, or were they victims in need of protection? The world of humans and the hidden world of monsters were about to intersect in a way nobody could have anticipated. While humans discussed treaties and negotiations, these creatures approached the alien ships cautiously. The first encounters were subtle, a shadow moving behind a forest edge, a ripple in the ocean as something massive passed beneath, a sudden wind as something flew over the mountains. The aliens noticed it too. Their eyes or whatever functioned as eyes widened and their body language showed fear. Despite their advanced technology, they sensed that Earth was more complicated than they had imagined. It was not just humans who held power on this planet. There were forces far older, far stronger, and far less predictable. Meanwhile, humans struggled to understand what was happening. Some scientists were terrified at the idea that monsters existed and were now observing aliens. Governments were divided. Some wanted to protect the aliens, some wanted to keep the monsters contained, and others wanted to prepare for war against any unknown threat. But the diplomats and scientists assigned to speak with the aliens remained focused on one thing: understanding the newcomer's story. The aliens spoke of loss, of loneliness, of the collapse of their civilization. They told of watching their planet die, of losing family and friends, of floating endlessly through the void, searching for a home. Humans listened, their hearts heavy with empathy. It was hard not to feel compassion for creatures who had endured so much suffering at the same time. The aliens were learning about humans. They observed our cities, our technology, our way of life. They were cautious, knowing that one wrong step could end their chance for survival. But they also seemed curious. They looked at human expressions, gestures, and reactions with an intensity that suggested they were trying to understand emotions and intentions. That humans realized that the aliens' desperation was genuine, but it was tempered by fear of human response. Both sides were feeling their way, testing boundaries, learning what could be trusted. Humanity was experiencing something extraordinary: communication with beings from another world. The aliens, though technologically advanced, relied on emotional honesty, pleading for mercy and understanding rather than issuing threats. Humans began to see a new truth. Intelligence was not measured by power alone, and strength could be shown in vulnerability as much as in technology. As humans debated how to respond, the monsters of Earth continued to watch silently, adding another layer of complexity to an already fragile situation. In this delicate balance, every moment mattered. A wrong word, a sudden movement, or a misinterpreted gesture could ignite panic or worse. The aliens were counting on humans to make the right choice, but the humans themselves were uncertain, struggling to understand not only the newcomers but also their own instincts. The entire planet held its breath. Humanity faced a choice that had never existed before: to act with empathy toward beings from another world, to trust in mercy, or to act out of fear and risk destroying something that had survived so much as hours turned into days. Small breakthroughs occurred. Scientists developed devices to translate the aliens' complex symbols into words, allowing deeper understanding. Diplomats and alien leaders held cautious meetings, exchanging ideas and explanations. Trust was growing, slowly but surely. And yet, humans could not forget the hidden observers, the monsters of Earth, who had made their presence known in subtle ways. Their judgment was as real and as powerful as any human authority, and humans understood that survival for the aliens would depend not only on the humans' mercy but also on the approval of these ancient, mysterious creatures. Humans were no longer alone on Earth in the sense they had once believed. Their understanding of life, power, and responsibility had expanded in ways they could barely articulate. The aliens were vulnerable, pleading, yet potentially dangerous if mishandled. The hidden monsters of Earth were watching, their silent influence shaping what would come next. Humanity was standing at the edge of a new reality, one where diplomacy, understanding, and instinct would all play a role in the fate of both aliens and the planet itself. The story of first contact was only beginning, but already, it had revealed the fragile beauty and terrifying complexity of life on Earth. As the days passed since the aliens' arrival, the tension on Earth grew heavier. Humans were beginning to understand that this was more than just a meeting between species. It was a confrontation of instincts, intelligence, and power, one that involved beings far beyond what most people had ever imagined. While humans debated, monitored, and observed, the hidden monsters of Earth were awakening. They had been quiet for centuries, existing in the shadows, in remote forests, deep oceans, and isolated mountain ranges, hidden from human eyes. They were creatures of immense power, with strength and abilities that surpassed anything human technology could achieve. They had lived through countless ages, witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations, and they sensed the presence of the aliens immediately. The first sign of their awakening was subtle. In the forests, massive trees shook as enormous figures moved through the undergrowth. Their footsteps were heavy but deliberate, not in haste, but in purpose. Animals of every kind fled at their approach, signaling instinctively that something ancient and powerful had returned to the world's attention. In the oceans, creatures that humans had assumed were myths swam close to the surface, their massive bodies creating waves that no ship could withstand. Some of them had intelligence rivaling humans, capable of assessing threats and forming strategies. High above, winged predators circled the skies, their sharp eyes scanning the alien ships hovering over cities and landmarks. These monsters were not merely reacting to the aliens, they were observing, judging, calculating. Unlike humans, who relied on discussion, negotiation, and emotion, the monsters acted according to instinct and a code older than human civilization. They had survived eons by understanding the balance of the planet, knowing when to intervene and when to stay hidden. Now, the arrival of the aliens had disturbed that balance. Something new, foreign, and unpredictable had entered the ecosystem of the Earth, and the monsters could not ignore it. Their presence became noticeable in ways that terrified the aliens. Lights flickered, strange roars echoed through valleys, shadows moved faster than the eye could track, and ripples in the oceans hinted at something massive swimming just below. The aliens, despite their advanced technology, began to sense fear for the first time. Their shields and weapons had protected them from countless dangers in space, but these Earth monsters were different. They did not rely on tools or energy sources, they relied on raw, natural power and intelligence. Every movement they made was calculated, every stance communicated dominance. The aliens, who had entered Earth expecting vulnerability to be enough, realized that survival here would not be simple. They had underestimated the planet itself, the hidden guardians who had been waiting silently for a time like this. Humans watched from a distance, both fascinated and terrified. Early reports came in from scientists and military observers, enormous footprints in remote areas, waves taller than buildings forming without storms, tremors that seemed unnatural. Drone footage captured fleeting images of towering silhouettes moving through forests and mountains. It became clear that these creatures were intelligent. They were aware of the aliens' presence and were observing their behavior. Humans began to understand that Earth was not defenseless, but neither was it fully controllable. There were forces here that had existed long before humanity, forces that could judge the aliens' intentions and act with devastating precision if provoked. The first encounter between monsters and aliens occurred in a remote desert. A massive creature, its form almost unrecognizable and larger than any human imagination, approached one of the hovering ships. The aliens, observing it through their instruments, froze. The creature did not attack immediately. Instead, it circled the ship slowly, studying it with a level of scrutiny that suggested understanding beyond human comprehension. It tilted its massive head, sniffed the air, and let out a low rumble. The aliens tried to communicate, projecting words and images as they had with humans, but the monster did not respond in a way they could understand. It was as if the creature was asking a question humans could not translate. Why are you here? What do you intend? Are you worthy of survival? Word of this encounter spread quickly among human teams monitoring the situation. Scientists and diplomats realized that the monsters were not mindless beasts, they were judges, guardians of the planet. They did not act on whim or hunger. They acted on understanding, a primal sense of justice that had been honed over millennia. The aliens, who had expected humans to be the primary authority, were forced to confront a new reality. They were not dealing with just one species, but with multiple layers of intelligence on Earth, and the decisions they made now could determine whether they survived or perished. As the aliens tried to navigate this new challenge, the monsters' behavior remained unpredictable yet deliberate. Some approached cities where humans were gathered, moving in ways that sent subtle signals rather than causing destruction. Shadows stretched across streets, buildings trembled slightly, and people caught glimpses of immense forms moving just beyond clear sight. The monsters seemed to be testing both the aliens and humanity, gauging reactions, observing intentions. Their presence was a reminder that the planet itself had its own rules. Rules older than human politics, older than human knowledge, and far more exacting. Meanwhile, the aliens experienced a mix of fear, fascination, and desperation. They had traveled across galaxies, encountering countless civilizations, yet they had never faced beings like these. The monsters were not aggressive without reason, but their very presence carried authority. The aliens realized that their survival would depend not just on pleading with humans, but on proving their intentions to a species that could judge, enforce, and destroy without hesitation. They had to be cautious, respectful, and strategic, or they would face annihilation. Humans observed all of this with a mixture of awe and dread. While diplomats tried to continue communication and scientists analyzed alien technology, the monsters acted according to instincts that humans could barely interpret. The humans realized that these creatures were not just participants, they were arbiters of fate, holding the power to allow or deny survival to anyone who entered Earth's domain. The presence of monsters changed everything. Diplomacy, technology, and negotiation could only go so far. In the end, the aliens would have to face judgment not just from humans, but from forces older and far more primal. One evening, a massive confrontation almost occurred near a coastal city. The aliens had hovered close to human settlements, projecting messages of peace and surrender, but a sea creature, hundreds of meters long, surfaced suddenly, sending massive waves crashing into the shore. Humans panicked, fearing attack, while the aliens were thrown into disarray. However, the creature did not attack the humans or the aliens. Instead, it observed, circling the ships carefully, letting the aliens understand through sheer presence that their actions were being judged. This demonstration was enough to show the aliens that survival required more than mere pleading. It required understanding, respect, and the ability to coexist within Earth's complex ecosystem of power. As the days went on, a pattern emerged. The monsters did not engage recklessly. They tested, observed, and occasionally intervened to guide interactions between humans and aliens. Their interventions were subtle but undeniable: a sudden storm over a landing area, a shadow moving to block an aggressive maneuver, or a deep rumble that forced humans and aliens alike to pause. Slowly, both species realized that these monsters were not enemies in the traditional sense. They were guardians, enforcing a balance that humans had never fully understood. Humans and aliens both understood an essential truth: survival on Earth required negotiation not only with humans, but with the planet itself, represented by the monsters. The aliens could no longer rely solely on technology, persuasion, or desperate pleas. They had to demonstrate humility, intelligence, and respect for forces far older than themselves. Humans, for the first time, began to recognize the planet as a living, active participant in the story unfolding above them, and the monsters, silent but powerful, had made their presence undeniable, reminding everyone that this was Earth, and on Earth, survival required understanding, power, instinct, and judgment in ways humans had never imagined. The stage was set for the next phase, where judgment, mercy, and the future of the aliens would be decided not just by humans, but by the ancient unseen guardians of the planet. The arrival of the aliens had awakened something primal and essential on Earth, and everyone now knew that the future depended on understanding forces far beyond what any human mind could control. The story was moving forward, with tension, suspense, and awe, building as the world waited to see what would happen next. The tension in the air was palpable. After days of watching, circling, and observing from the shadows, Earth's monsters had finally decided it was time to act. Humans watched with bated breath, unsure of what to expect. The aliens hovered above major cities, projecting messages of peace and begging for mercy, but the situation had changed. The presence of monsters had made it clear that Earth was not theirs to command, and survival would no longer depend solely on humans' decisions. The creatures that had been dormant for centuries, the guardians of the planet, were now stepping forward to test, judge, and ultimately decide the fate of the extraterrestrial visitors. The first interaction took place in a remote forest far from human cities. A massive alpha creature emerged, larger and more imposing than any human had ever imagined. Its skin shimmered like polished stone, and its eyes held a depth of wisdom that seemed to span millennia. Every movement it made was deliberate, calculated, and commanding. The alien ships above sensed it immediately. They paused, hovering silently, as if realizing that the balance of power had shifted. This was not just a test of humans' will or morality, it was a direct judgment from Earth itself. The alpha creature approached slowly, making no sudden movements. Yet the energy it radiated filled the area with an almost tangible tension. The aliens, despite their advanced technology, were visibly shaken. Their shields and energy weapons could protect them from cosmic storms, space debris, even hostile civilizations. But the monsters operated on a different level. Their strength was innate, a combination of instinct, intelligence, and sheer force of nature. As the alpha creature drew closer, the aliens attempted to communicate, projecting holographic images and messages. They pleaded again for mercy, promising loyalty, peace, and cooperation. They offered knowledge, technology, and resources in exchange for survival. Their voices, or whatever functioned as voices for them, carried emotion and sincerity. But the alpha creature did not respond immediately. It paused, observing, analyzing, as if testing the truthfulness of every word. Humans nearby could only watch, fearing that a single misstep might trigger disaster. Military personnel held their breath, ready to intervene if the situation escalated. But they understood deep down that they were powerless in the presence of such a creature. Scientists and diplomats tried to interpret the interactions, noting the subtle movements, the vibrations in the air, and the energy shifts that signaled communication beyond words. It became clear that the monsters were not acting randomly. They were testing intentions, evaluating honesty, and determining whether the aliens deserved to live on Earth. What felt like hours. The alpha creature finally moved. Slowly, it circled the aliens, tilting its massive head, examining them from every angle. The aliens responded with gestures of submission, lowering their ships slightly and projecting more messages of peace. They emphasized that their species had suffered unimaginable loss and that their survival depended entirely on the mercy of those they now faced. They promised to live in harmony with Earth and humanity, to never harm the planet or its inhabitants, and to share their knowledge and technology responsibly. Every gesture was meant to convey sincerity, but the true test was whether the monsters sensed truth in their hearts. Then, something remarkable happened. Smaller monsters, previously hidden in the surrounding forests, emerged. Some were enormous beasts with claws capable of crushing stone, while others were creatures of the air or water, their forms both beautiful and terrifying. They did not attack. Instead, they surrounded the aliens, creating a perimeter of power, signaling that the judgment was collective. The aliens realized that survival would require more than pleading. It would require earning trust and demonstrating respect for the guardians of Earth. They had to show humility and understanding, traits they had rarely needed in their long travels through space. As the day progressed, humans and aliens alike witnessed the subtle exchange of power. The monsters communicated through body language, vibrations, and energy shifts that humans could barely interpret. The aliens adapted quickly, projecting images of their home world, the destruction they had suffered, and their commitment to peace. They explained, in the most transparent way they could, that they were not conquerors but victims, traveling across galaxies in search of refuge. The monsters' response was deliberate. They continued to observe, circling, tilting, and occasionally rumbling in ways that signaled assessment. It was clear that this was a judgment not of aggression, but of character and intention. Humans learned something profound that day. The monsters were not mere animals or destructive forces. They were guardians of balance, creatures that had existed long before humanity and understood the delicate equilibrium of the planet. Their power was immense, but it was guided by wisdom, instinct, and a sense of justice. They did not act out of cruelty or malice. They acted to maintain order and to ensure that any being on Earth respected the rules of survival. But aliens, despite their advanced technology and intelligence, were now forced to confront a reality they had not anticipated, that survival on Earth would require humility, respect, and the willingness to follow rules set by beings far older and wiser than themselves. The interactions continued over several days. The aliens demonstrated their knowledge, sharing technology that could improve human life while carefully ensuring they did not dominate or control. They performed tasks to show their respect for the planet's natural systems, including monitoring pollution, managing resources, and assisting with environmental restoration. The monsters watched, assessing the sincerity and effectiveness of these actions. Humans began to understand that this was a form of communication and judgment far beyond their own systems of law or morality. The monsters were teaching both aliens and humans a lesson in coexistence, patience, and understanding of power. Then came the moment that truly defined the interaction. The alpha creature, along with a council of other powerful monsters, approached the aliens closely. The air vibrated with energy, and even humans at a distance felt the weight of their presence. The aliens, now fully aware of the gravity of the moment, projected a final message. They would abide by Earth's rules, respect its guardians, and live in harmony. They placed themselves in positions of submission, lowering their ships and demonstrating that they would not resist if punished. It was a gesture of trust and humility that would determine their fate. The monsters responded in a way that surprised both humans and aliens. Instead of attacking, they displayed a form of mercy. Slowly, the alpha creature stepped back, signaling that the aliens' pledge was accepted. The other monsters echoed this decision, creating a path for the aliens to retreat safely and integrate into the planet's system. The lesson was clear: mercy was given not blindly, but as a reward for honesty, respect, and the willingness to coexist. The aliens had survived because they had demonstrated the right intentions, and the monsters had shown that true power was not only strength, but the ability to judge and grant mercy wisely. Humans, witnessing all of this, were both relieved and awestruck. The monsters had proven that Earth was not defenseless, but that its guardians did not act out of anger or cruelty. They acted to maintain balance, to ensure that any being, human or alien, would respect the rules that kept the planet safe. The aliens, once terrified and pleading, now understood that survival on Earth required far more than technology or force. It required understanding, humility, and the ability to coexist with beings who had lived longer, seen more, and held power greater than anything they had faced before. A fragile understanding had been established. The aliens were allowed to remain, but under strict observation and guidance. Humans realized that the monsters were not enemies, they were protectors, teachers, and arbiters of survival. The aliens had learned a lesson that no textbook, technology, or culture could have taught them. On Earth, mercy came not from dominance or fear, but from respect, honesty, and the recognition of power greater than one's own. The story of this judgment would resonate for generations. Humans learned that the planet itself had guardians, creatures whose intelligence and authority were beyond comprehension. The aliens learned that survival was earned, not demanded, and the monsters demonstrated that true strength lay not only in physical power, but in wisdom, patience, and the ability to grant mercy when it was deserved. The future of Earth, aliens, and humans now depended on this fragile alliance, a balance maintained not through fear, but through understanding, respect, and the careful navigation of power. After the tense interactions and careful judgment by Earth's monsters, a fragile sense of order finally settled over the planet. The aliens, once desperate and fearful, began to understand the rules of survival on Earth. They had witnessed power far beyond their technology, and they had learned that the guardians of this planet were neither enemies nor mindless beasts. They were wise arbiters who enforced balance, justice, and the natural order. The humans, too, learned valuable lessons. They realized that Earth was alive in ways they had never fully understood. Its protection was not just in human hands, but in the hands of creatures who had existed far longer, whose knowledge and power were profound, and whose judgment was absolute. The aliens quickly adapted to this new reality. No longer arrogant or complacent, they began to cooperate openly with humans and the monsters alike. They offered technology that could benefit the planet without threatening its natural order. Energy sources that were clean, powerful, and renewable were shared. Systems for improving agriculture, medicine, and communication were introduced, all designed to work within Earth's ecosystem. The aliens' knowledge was vast, and humanity eagerly absorbed it. But unlike past encounters with advanced civilizations in stories and history, the humans understood that this gift came with responsibility. They could not misuse it, because the monsters were always watching, ready to enforce the rules if the balance was threatened at the same time. The monsters began to interact more openly with both humans and aliens. Their presence, once hidden and mysterious, became a part of everyday life in subtle ways. Massive footprints appeared near cities as reminders of their power, but they did no harm. Shadows passed over human settlements, not to terrify, but to show vigilance. Occasionally, oceanic guardians would surface near ports, reminding humanity that the planet itself had sentinels. Humans began to respect these beings, acknowledging that true strength was not just measured by size or weapons, but by wisdom, restraint, and responsibility. Over time, trust slowly developed. The monsters had judged the aliens and found them worthy of mercy. Now they observed how humans and aliens could coexist under their guidance. The aliens themselves were transformed by this experience. Having faced the judgment of beings more powerful than themselves, they learned humility and patience. Their arrogance, common among species that had mastered space travel, faded. They realized that survival did not come from domination or force, but from cooperation, respect, and understanding. For the first time, they truly appreciated the balance of life and the delicate responsibility of being part of a larger system. They no longer viewed Earth as a refuge to be exploited, but as a home to be respected. Their gratitude toward the monsters and humans grew daily, expressed not only in words, but in actions and offerings that strengthened trust and harmony. Humans, too, were changed. Witnessing the aliens' humility and the monsters' wisdom, they learned lessons that went beyond politics or science. They understood that strength could be tempered by mercy, that power could be guided by intelligence, and that survival depended on respecting forces larger than themselves. Governments began to cooperate more openly, realizing that humanity could not face every challenge alone. Diplomats, scientists, and leaders worked together with the aliens, establishing councils to manage resources, coordinate technological exchange, and ensure that Earth's guardians remained respected. Humanity was no longer the sole ruler of the planet it shared responsibility with both alien and terrestrial guardians. A sense of harmony began to develop. Though it was delicate and fragile, the aliens fulfilled their promises, helping to restore ecosystems damaged by centuries of neglect. They introduced technologies that cleaned water, reduced pollution, and stabilized climate systems. Humans learned to use this technology responsibly, under the watchful eyes of the monsters. In return, the monsters tolerated the aliens' presence, intervening only when necessary to maintain balance. Slowly, a system emerged where the three groups, humans, aliens, and monsters, coexisted, each respecting the power and responsibility of the others. The Earth, once threatened, began to flourish under this careful stewardship. But the process was not without challenges. Some humans were fearful of the aliens, suspicious of their intentions, and hesitant to accept the monsters' judgment. Rumors and misinformation spread, causing occasional panic and misunderstanding. Likewise, some aliens struggled to adapt, finding human behavior unpredictable and the monsters' silent judgments intimidating. Yet, over time, patience and communication began to heal these rifts. Humans learned that fear could be tempered with knowledge and respect, and the aliens learned that survival required humility and cooperation. The monsters remained impartial, ensuring that both humans and aliens upheld the principles necessary for coexistence. One day, a massive gathering took place at a neutral location, far from human cities. The aliens, humans, and the largest of the monsters came together to formalize the fragile alliance. Humans were awed by the scale of the monsters, some of whom towered over buildings. The aliens demonstrated their willingness to cooperate, showing that they had not only adapted to Earth but had embraced their role as allies rather than intruders. The alpha creature, the same one that had judged the aliens in the forest, stood at the center, radiating authority and wisdom. It was a moment that symbolized the new order, one in which survival, respect, and cooperation were recognized as far more powerful than fear or violence. The alliance brought benefits to all. Humans gained access to advanced technology while learning how to live in balance with the planet. The aliens found a home where they were protected and respected, yet held accountable for their actions. The monsters maintained the planet's natural order, ensuring that no species, human or alien, could dominate or destroy. Together, this unlikely combination of beings created a new world, one where strength was balanced with wisdom, and mercy was given to those who deserved it. The story spread throughout human society, becoming a lesson in humility, cooperation, and the importance of respecting forces beyond our understanding. Children learned of the aliens' journey and the monsters' role as guardians. Scientists wrote papers detailing the complex interactions and the lessons humanity could draw from them. Leaders used the event as a reminder that power must always be tempered with responsibility. And the aliens, once desperate and pleading, now stood as partners in the stewardship of Earth, their survival guaranteed only because they had learned the most important lesson of all. Mercy is given to those who understand it, and strength is greatest when it is guided by wisdom. Years passed, and the planet thrived under this new arrangement. Humans grew more mindful of the environment. Aliens contributed knowledge and technology, and monsters remained vigilant, their presence a constant reminder that the Earth itself had guardians who would not tolerate imbalance. Conflicts still arose occasionally, but they were resolved with dialogue and careful judgment. The terrifying uncertainty of the first encounters became a distant memory, replaced by cautious optimism and mutual respect. What had begun as fear, desperation, and judgment had evolved into understanding, alliance, and coexistence. In the end, the aliens, humans, and monsters created a world that none of them could have imagined alone. The aliens had survived against incredible odds, not through technology or force, but through humility and respect. Humans had learned lessons that reshaped their understanding of power, responsibility, and cooperation. And the monsters, silent but powerful, had enforced balance while teaching mercy, showing that true strength lies not only in force, but in wisdom, patience, and the ability to guide others toward harmony. Earth had been tested in a way that no human history book had ever recorded, and it had passed. The planet was safe, its guardians vigilant, and its new allies united in the fragile but promising hope of a future shaped by understanding, respect, and coexistence.